Hello, I'm Matthew Craig, and today I will be discussing laboring for the Clarks, archaeology of a late 18th to early 19th century potential enslaved laborer dwelling. In 2022, Richard Grubb Associates conducted a large archaeological survey for a proposed warehouse development project in West Windsor, Mercer County, New Jersey for Bridgepoint, West Windsor. The survey identified 8 archaeological sites, 5 of which were found in a farm field once owned by the Clarke family, which owned the parcel from the 18th century until 1842. The sites in the field were called the Area F1 through F5 sites and were about 700 feet east of the Clark's home. What were these sites? Did they all date from the same time period, and how were they connected to the Clarke family? For this, we had to dig deeper into the Clark's land records. Documents reveal that the Clarke family, a wealthy landed family in central New Jersey, used a variety of free, indentured, and unfortunately enslaved labor to maintain the family land and business ventures. The parcel containing the sites was initially owned by James Clarke Sr., who purchased the property between 1737 and 1771. The elder James died in 1771. His obituary noted him as a kind and loving husband, a tender and indulgent parent, a good master, a useful and obliging neighbor, and to crown the whole, a just and honest man. James's designation as a good master is in relation to his use of labor. Records indicate he owned the time of an indentured man, likely of European birth, the remaining time for which was valued at £5 in 1771. The elder James's son, James Jr., inherited the land after his father's death. Junior's brother also owned the time of indentured Europeans, and several of whom ran away. The advertisements for these runaways are quite intriguing. Junior died in 1785 and the property passed to his son, Dr. Israel. Israel and Elizabeth Clarke owned the property until 1842, though Israel died a few years earlier in 1837. Tax ratables indicate that by 1791 the Clarks were taxed for enslaving one person, likely an adult male. It is possible that the Clarks had enslaved women and individuals not old enough to be considered taxable. From this point forward, the Clarks, who were Quakers, utilized enslaved laborers to maintain the property, and the number itemized on ratables and census lists increased over time. Yes, Quakers did in fact enslave other people, despite a whitewashing of history to suggest the opposite. Because of their wealth and social standing, they were never disowned from the Society of Friends, despite the abolition movement heralded amongst the Friends and Methodists in the region. Between 1791 and 1822, the Clarks paid tax on between 2 and 3 people. In 1840, the Clarks were among 2 remaining families in the township who still enslaved people for their own benefit. The 1830 census fully reflects the scale of enslavement on the farmstead at that time. That year, 11 household members were enumerated, 5 of whom were free black people. Clark's household included 2 enslaved men, one aged 24 to 36 and another 36 to 55 years old, 2 free black boys/men between 10 and 25 years old, and 1 free black girl. While the younger men and girl were all listed as free people of color, it is possible that they were indentured and had been born to enslaved parents after the passage of New Jersey's 1804 Gradual Emancipation Act, which required women and men born after 1804 to enslaved parents to be emancipated upon reaching 18 and 21 years of age, respectively. Israel's 1837 inventory lists unexpired time of service of black man Curtis, revealing that formerly enslaved people were required to work the property for specific durations. In 1840, Elizabeth still enslaved one man aged 45 to 55. The racial background of all enslaved individuals was not recorded. Historic documents from elsewhere in the state indicate they could have been of African descent, Native American descent, or of mixed racial background. Were any of the Area F sites linked to the family's indentured servants and enslaved workers? We think so. Even before the Clarks bought the property, a small quantity of Native American artifacts pointed to limited indigenous use of the landscape for hunting, resource processing, and stone tool production. The full period of land use could not be determined as few datable artifacts were found. The majority of artifacts found at the Area F sites date to the historic period. While I'm going to focus on the Area F2 historic occupation during this presentation, I first want to call attention to the archaeology at the Area F1 and F3 through F5 sites. Of these, the Area F1 site, the farthest west of the site, postdates the 1820s. No evidence of an on-site occupation was found in the site, such as a foundation remains or trash pits, suggesting that the site just represents a location for refuse disposal by the Clarke family and later property owners. That said, the site likely extended beyond the project footprint, and we can't rule out that the material found, such as ceramics, glass, and some architectural artifacts, is related to a small home located nearby. The Area F3 site also appears to represent a location of refuse accumulation from nearby landowners that accumulated after the 1820s. A nearby 1849 wheelwright shop may have also used the field for disposal of coal and ash. The site contained no evidence of on-site occupation, and trenches found contained an octagon-shaped terracotta drain tiles installed after 1858 to lower the water table and improve crop yield. The Area F4 site also contained evidence of trenches with terracotta drain pipes, and like the Area F3 site, this location also contained post-1820s artifact in coal and ash that could be linked to a nearby 1849 wheelwright shop. Several post hole features were found that seemed to be evenly spaced 8.5 feet apart. These posts could represent a post and ground building, possibly for housing animals such as horses that the Clarke family owned, or the posts could represent fence lines that enclosed paddocked areas. Indeed, the Clarkes bred numerous horses on their property. The post stands contain no artifacts, suggesting that they were installed prior to the 1820s, likely when the Clarke family owned the farm tract. The Area F5 site was located farthest east amongst the sites. This site contained historic artifacts dating from the 1820s through the 1840s. It appears to have simply been used as a refuse disposal area and was not occupied based on the lack of cultural features such as foundation remains, refuse pits, or post stains. Now, let's get to the principal occupation site. The Area F2 site is one of the larger of the sites found. There, we hand dug 17 5-foot square units and removed topsoil with a backhoe and 6 strip blocks to expose buried features. All told, we dug just over 3,000 square feet, or a 14.7% sample of the site. Artifact distribution data indicates that the major occupation area was in the northern part of the site, where creamware and redware were found. But we also have another possible occupation or useware area in the southwest portion of the site, where post-1775 pearlware was found. It is unclear if this southwestern area was occupied or just used for refuse disposal. There, only one post stain was found. The northern occupation area contained an abundance of domestic and architectural artifacts and may date from the 1760s to the early 19th century. No artifacts made after the 1770s were found in the northern area. There, a large, shallow, rubble-filled subfloor pit was found surrounded by several other features. Of 63 identified features in the site, 23 may be cultural, including the large subfloor pit, 5 possible post stains, and 2 possible pits. The remainder are amorphous or oval stains that lacked artifacts and could be of natural formation. The large subfloor pit was called Feature F21 and marks the location of a former building. The actual building size couldn't be determined but was larger than the pit below the building. The subfloor pit measured roughly 16 feet east-west by 7.5 feet north-south. The pit's shape suggests the former building had an east-west orientated roof ridgeline, orientating the building with a southern exposure to take advantage of the sun's heat to warm its interior. No post features were found within or next to the subfloor pit. It is possible the building had a very shallow stone brick foundation that didn't penetrate the subsoil. It was a sill-on-grade cabin-like building, or the sill rested on wooden piers that didn't extend below the topsoil. These construction methods are consistent with buildings intended for ephemeral use to limit building expenses. Such buildings could also be easily moved about the landscape, a common practice in the 18th and 19th century. While no masonry foundations were found, The subfloor pit was filled with handmade brick and stone, suggesting at least part of the building had a shallow stone foundation and may have had a chimney made of brick instead of clay and wood chimneys, as was common for ephemeral dwellings. Based on brick density, we think the chimney was on a building's east side. The building that stood at the Area F2 site could conceivably represent a separate living quarter for the Clarke's enslaved or indentured workers. This building stood roughly 700 feet northeast of the main Clarke family farmstead. While not common in New Jersey, Richard Grubb Associates has identified a similar site in Freehold, Monmouth County, where enslaved laborers were quartered about 1,300 feet from the enslavers' residence from the same time period. Separate housing may have been more common on large farmsteads owned by wealthy white families than we had previously thought. Given the lack of nails found in the subfloor pit, the building was likely moved to another area on Israel Clarke's property before the 1820s. Within Feature F21, a total of 1,826 artifacts were recovered, of which 1,552 were architectural related, 203 were domestic related, and 54 were fuel items. The ceramics consist of redware pans, possibly used for dairy processing, and creamware plates. Bottle glass was also recovered, 2 pieces of which had evidence of edge working, indicating the occupants were improvising makeshift and speeding tool production with materials that they had at hand. Use-wear analysis is currently being conducted on these 2 pieces to help us determine how the cutting or scraping implements were used. Interestingly, no personal artifacts were found in the pit feature or nearby features. Food remains were also sparse. Artifacts from the pit suggest its use between 1760s and 1810s. The lack of white salt glazed stoneware, tin glazed earthenware, Jackfield, and North Midlands coarse buff earthenware from the site actually suggests the site wasn't occupied prior to the mid-1770s. The low number of artifacts found in the plow zone around the former building may result from site occupants' restricted spending power or meagerly provisioned materials by the Clarkes. Alternatively, we can't rule out that the site occupants discarded refuse in off-site locations to avoid refuse accumulation around their home. Likewise, they may have engaged in yard sweeping, a practice observed at several black-occupied sites and even urban white working-class sites. Yard sweeping allowed the yard to serve as an extension of the home and remain well kept. The evidence reveals that prior to the 1820s, the Area F2 site was abandoned and the site reverted to an agricultural field or an enclosure for animal husbandry. Collectively, the Area F sites reveal that the farm field east of the former Clarke family home was used in various ways that changed over time. These include containing an ephemeral home for indentured or enslaved individuals, refuse disposal areas, animal shelters, or fenced enclosures, and finally, the field was improved after 1858 using ceramic drain tiles to lower the water table to increase crop production. For these reasons, all 5 sites were determined significant and part of a larger historic property designated as the Area F Site's Archaeological Historic District. The district is eligible for the National Register because of the information it provides. Of particular note, the Area F2 site is part of a growing body of evidence in New Jersey that informs our understanding of enslaved people, their everyday lives, and the places they lived. While several sites of enslavement have been found that shed light on religious practices and cultural background, such as Marlpit Hall in Middletown, Monmouth County, the Area F2 site helps us understand the placement of enslaved or indentured servants' home on the landscape as distinct archaeological sites separate from their oppressors. Through a project redesigned by Bridgepoint West Windsor, 95% of this historic district will ultimately be saved and preserved in place through a program of capping and filling. I would like to thank and acknowledge everyone who has been involved with this project and who has helped me through all of this. Thank you so much.